Welcome to For Every Response, the podcast from Emergency Services Times, sponsored by MSA Safety. In this series, we bring you sessions from the Emergency Services Show and the Emergency Tech Show 2025. In this episode, the panel, led by the National Fire Chiefs Council, looks at the risk from contaminants in all aspects of firefighter activity. Chaired by ACFO Luke Gazzard, the panel discusses how to minimise risk, whether that's on the fireground or back at the fire station, as all services grapple with the problem of lowering the risk of exposure.
This is going to be a discussion on the risks and how to keep the exposure risk as low as reasonably practical on fire service property. On stage we have Chief Fire Officer Peter Arnevall from Stockholm Fire Brigade, Becky Yates, Health and Safety Manager from Avon Fire and Rescue, John Asher, Watch Manager at West Mids Fire, who is a hazmat trainer in his day role, and John Ashton, Senior Health and Safety Manager at West Mids Fire, who also leads with me on the NFCC Contaminants project. So let's kick it off to a question to John Ashton. It's already been identified through the age of the building stock here in the UK and certainly over in Sweden as well. 1875 is their oldest station. With an ageing building stock here in the UK, how can fire and rescue services manage the flow of contaminants to reduce the risk as much as reasonably practical?
Thanks, Luke. Ooh, sorry, is that a bit better? Well, I think it's really difficult because the obvious place to go and look is money. Have we got the right investment? Have we got the right budget? But it's not really simple as that. And on our earlier presentation, we talked around funding and the identification of funding. The first thing I would do is look through stock management and capital investment. As you're due to work closely with your facilities teams and work on your stock investment, if something has been identified that needs an upgrade, always make sure contaminants is part of that. Recently at West Mids, we had an upgrade of showers. Well, actually, are the showers in the right place? Are they in an amber zone or a red zone? Or can we move those showers to the right place? That would probably be a starter for 10. We would advocate zoning. So that's obviously, or trials of zoning. So that's obviously been picked up through research, FBU research and a STEP research. But we would trial red, amber, green. Does red, amber, green work? We would trial red and amber or clean and dirty. So we would look at trialing as well. And then finally, I would say about procedural documents as well. So actually, if our stock isn't where it needs to be, and it's not just about an aging building, actually, is it the right setup within your fire station to start with? Well, actually, procedurally, you might be able to get away around that. So that is taking the contaminant off site. And then when you get back to your service, having an outside area before. So they were the things I would take into account to start with.
Yeah, really interesting. John, can you just clarify one point around the provision of showers on fire stations? Are you able just to say what the regs are and how they should be interpreted?
Well, that would depend on, so it's set clearly within the regs, and the approved code of practice will depend on how many staff members you've got. So depending on how many staff members you've got, there'll be a clear number of how many showers you will have. But the problem, of course, is it's not quite as clear as that, because within our industry, we'll have people that move around from station to station and cover. So we were having a conversation earlier, even looking along the lines, actually, should we have male and female shower and washing facilities anymore? Or should we have gender neutral boxes, which seems to be the way to go now? So if you're looking at that, going back to what I talked about earlier, the basic set, the basic principles of legislation, work out how many people you have within there, and then look at how many showers. Remember, you also might have to go a stage further, because you don't just need the showers against the regulations, you need to shower within a certain amount of time as well. So when we're advocating, or the NFCC or your organisation's advocating, let's say, shower within the hour, have you got enough showers to get the appropriate amount of people through there quickly enough as well? So regulations, but it always goes back to what I said before, assess the risk, and your control measures will tell you what you need.
Yeah, thanks, John. Thanks for clearing that up. Becky, I know you've done a lot of work in Avon on zoning of stations, done some trials. Can you just describe what you've done and some of the results you found?
Yeah, absolutely. So we started off by trialing the red, amber, green zones, and we literally did that by putting out plans of all the stations and going through and looking at from a plans perspective how we could manage that. That was really difficult. All of our stations were not built with the management of contaminants in mind. So whatever we were going to do was only going to be the best with what we had to work with. But we managed it, and involving the crews and getting them to engage with the trials and feedback to us was really helpful, because it helps build on those, changing those cultures with people's mindsets that we are actually trying to help people. This is not just a new process that we're implementing. We're not ticking boxes. We are genuinely trying to do the best that we can. So we've done some trials with the red, amber, green, and then as John seems to be doing similar, we then moved towards the red and green. So taking the amber out altogether, again, that was really difficult. One of our biggest problem areas has been our on-call stations. We have quite a few, and they are really small. Some of them are basically just a hut or a garage, and they house everything in there. At the time they were built, they were probably great because it's got everything into one area. But you're looking at on-call stations where they have appliances, kit, office spaces, meeting areas, gym equipment, all housed within the same area. And when you're trying to look at how you zone it with regards to contaminants, it's almost impossible. Added on to that, the fact that we are struggling for resources and funding to push out getting some of the works done, and it really is very, very challenging.
Yeah, really, really interesting. John Asher, I know you've done a lot of work in West Mids. Can you just briefly describe sort of some of the work you're doing and also the challenges you might be facing as well?
Yeah, of course. I think everybody that's been up here this afternoon has echoed the same thing, that the biggest barrier is attitudes, behaviours, and how we can increase the understanding within our workforces as to what the actual risk is that they're facing. And that has been adopted certainly through West Mids by quite I like to think comprehensive training as to understand what the risk of this contaminant is, and then also a structured processes in between where we can, everyone has a different concept of the word, but quite cheaply manage that risk and stop that transfer of these particulate from the centre of the risk into the fire engine, then back to the fire station. And managing able to sort of stop that at source and stop that transfer ultimately makes things a little bit easier to clean. Hopefully within that as well, with some of these lessons, we've had really, really quite frank discussions with what people are perceiving from what they've read and how they've actually interpreted that information, and hopefully got people understanding a little bit more of what the risks actually are rather than what they think they are. So, and it's also looking at behaviours as well, and culturally. We've been quite lucky in the service. The date June 23 sticks in my mind, where our operational service, we had greater than 50% had only served for 5 years. So there was a huge sort of retirement because of age of the workforce. So again, well, yes, it was detrimental. We lost a lot of experience. We've also got that opportunity to put forward, look, guys, we've got this equipment. This is what it's used for. It's keeping you safe and keeping you effective and keeping you healthier, which is ultimately what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. Peter, given what we've just heard and discussed from a UK sort of viewpoint, I know you touched on it in an earlier presentation, but do you just want to give us a flavour of some of the challenges you faced managing your building stock? Because I know you've also got a modular type of station that can be moved from place to place if needed.
Yeah, so as I said, my oldest fire station is from 1875. I got one from 1879, and they were built for horses. They are not modern fire stations at all, which means that we had to go and look at all of our 17 fire stations and look at them differently. So they all differ a bit on how we do it, depending on how the layout is on that particular station. But we will also be doing it step by step, changing out the ventilation systems. That's really expensive. But what can we do until we have the funding for changing the ventilation system? So we've been doing it step by step. We're not there at all of the stations yet, but we're almost there until we've come to a point where we are comfortable. But and I just want to touch in on that, the gender neutral thing, the gender neutral dressing rooms, because that was one of the things that we actually discovered. They are space efficient, which means we can save a lot of space by doing gender neutral dressing rooms. And you get another advantage as well. You get a shatter directly after the incident. When you come back, you can start your after action review, debrief, none depending on gender. So we actually had the crews actually like that, because they get a bigger sense of they get together much more, which is better. So that's actually space efficient. But then we got this modular system, because we're renovating 2 of the fire stations at the moment, and we're doing total renovations. So we got this modular fire station system, which is different modules that you can build. You can have 1 story or 3 stories, depending on what the layout on the disposable grounds. And they are also movable. And that system we actually have a dual purpose for, because in case of war, we know that the fire stations are a target, legitimate target according to Russia. We see that down in Ukraine. So we actually have that, so we're mobile with the fire stations as well. And we actually donated 5 of those fire stations down to Ukraine, and they're being used directly on the front lines now, being moved as the front line moves. And the aggressor Russia is shelling them. So, yeah, and that's also that's also one way of handling contaminants, because you can put the modules in a good working, so you get a good workflow straight away. So yeah,
it's really interesting. I think we need to touch on finance here as well. It's one of our biggest sort of challenges, along with culture as well. I think I'll give an example. At Avon Fire and Rescue Service, we're knocking down Bath Fire Station at this moment in time. Sorry, we're just waiting for planning permission, hopefully next week, to then knock it down. We've designed a new fire station with contaminants in mind, and Becky's been really involved in that piece of work. So we're managing that flow quite easily. It's not so easy when you look at existing on-call stations or existing stations perhaps in the West Mids. So would you be able to put a value on what that's costing you, or have you got that within budgets, or are you challenged to try to fund that work?
I think we're challenged. I don't think anybody knows the answer. People are trying to make their way through this themselves. They're trying to zone their way through it. They're trying to procedurally manage their way through it. It's not in existing budgets at the moment, and it is not provided through government to put to stations at the moment. So touching on that, what services that we've noted and what we're finding are trying to do is, because the document said you should zone and you should put red, amber, green zones, we've red, amber, green. But does anybody really understand what amber is and how amber works? So an example of that is, if your showers are upstairs and you've taken most of the contaminant off outside, but you've got a contaminant on you, your amber zone is all the way through to wherever it is. And then that's okay, but with conversations from the HSE, they're saying, well, when you use that route for your day-to-day work and not emergency work, it can't be amber anymore. It will have to go back to being green. So how do you work that? So if you set off a fire station now, it would be nothing like the old fire stations. So we do need to be very careful. Now, what we should expect from the NFCC is a piece of work that tells us what a best practice fire station looks like. But ultimately, they're going to be like they are for a number of years now. So for me, back to, like I said, stock management, capital investment, change your fire stations as you can. Modular is a great idea as well, and then wait for information from the NFCC.
Yeah. This episode of the Emergency Services Times podcast is sponsored by MSA Safety, proudly supporting emergency services and first responders on the front line. At MSA Safety, protecting first responders isn't just what we do, it's who we are. We work closely with fire and rescue services across the UK to develop and deliver safety solutions designed to meet your ever-evolving needs. That includes MSA Bristol Firefighter PPE, trusted by services across the UK and beyond, shaped through years of collaboration with frontline teams. It also includes our growing investment in innovation and technology, from the connected M1 SCBA modular solution to our agile, fully managed service model that helps keep crews protected and ready to respond. But for us, safety goes beyond equipment. We believe in standing shoulder to shoulder with the people who dedicate their lives to protecting others, whether it's supporting firefighter charities, backing mental health initiatives, or showing up for community events. MSA is proud to be part of the Emergency Services family. To learn more about our work in the UK and how we're supporting first responders every step of the way, visit www.msasafety.com. With MSA Safety, when you go in, we go in with you.
Let's just open this up into the wider context of contaminants. So we've got a level 1 commander on the incident ground, a crew manager as an example. How do they know how dirty they are and when they need to contaminate? I'll just open that up to the group, because it's a really, really difficult question to say, actually, I feel like I need to decontaminate now, or clean, or not. How are you approaching that, John?
I think part of it is it's actually role specific that you're then going to expect that person to do. If someone has come out, they've had a hot and arduous wear, it is worth mentioning as well that you're not just going to look at the physical condition of them. If they've had arduous wear or even a difficult rescue, you've got to look at that individual's capability on the fireground right there and then. Mental health and physical health. What can they do for me? Am I then going to ask that person who is covered in fire contaminant to work in close proximity in what would essentially be either a cold zone or the tail end of a warm zone? Am I creating for other people, but then balancing that with, if that person is okay to continue work, can I protect their respiratory tract? By dampening down their PPE, we're not washing, emphasis not to wash, it's stopping that particulate from liberating and giving them some respiratory protection. Would they be able to then go forward and maybe assist with a makeup, for example, of equipment? Are they able to do that? Or have we got resources where we can go, actually, you know what, there's enough resources on the fireground, take over from maybe an incident command role in terms of Zulu 1 or something like that. But again, it is very hard, because it is the question that hangs over this entire project that I think science is still gleaning an answer for. How clean is clean?
Yeah. In terms of learning products, Becky, what have we got in Avon that enables a firefighter to make that decision? How have we upskilled them to recognise the risks?
So for us, we procured and published lots of documentation early on in our journey. And this was a suite of operational information notes. We had some reminder notes. We were looking at clean cab guidance as it was then. We had 2 educational packages. And one of the things that I really think helped us was when we came to the part where we were looking at how people record contaminations, exposures and potential exposures, we aligned that to the same way that they would record other hazardous material exposures that they've occurred. So, for example, things like exposure to asbestos or waterborne contaminants, they will be subject to being recorded on our health and safety platform and investigated accordingly. So, when it comes now to fire contaminants, we're following that same process because it's something that ops personnel are used to doing anyway. So it just aligns, and it also helps with the mind shift of they are all equally as hazardous to your health, short term and long term.
Just to add as well, part of the training that we go through when we're talking to crews is just to re-emphasise, if you've been in that exact situation that you're talking about, you're exiting a fire, that there's no absolutes. Of course there aren't. Every incident has a different dynamic to it, so the actual constituent parts of those products of combustion are going to be different. But the question to ask as you're going through, is my PPE contaminated or am I contaminated? The two are very, very different things. If the PPE is contaminated, and I was really interested in what you said earlier, that it should be the last resort. Certainly culturally, when we sort of look historically, even something, let's say, relatively innocent as a car fire in an open area, we would still have firefighters practically sat in the seat putting that thing out. Whereas now we're a little bit more cognizant with what's going on. It's like, guys, should we try and knock him that back from a distance? Let's suppress what's coming off that thing before we expose ourselves and limit that contaminant.
So is there a change in firefighting tactics then for certain types of incidents?
Yes, I think so. I think certainly amongst our incident command team, etc. When they're looking at people moving from firefighter to crew commander, the questions during their training is a question of, I know you always use a scenario to emphasize your point, don't you? But if you've got a car on fire in the middle of a 100-meter park, why am I bothering putting this thing out? Is it better to let the contaminants burn off rather than creating a sludge that's then potentially contaminating grasses, soils, may even get into watercourses, while also contaminating PPE as well? It's not an absolute, it's a question to ask.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I know from where I'm stood, Peter, the Swedish fire service seems quite well advanced in their firefighting tactics with innovation. How have you adopted or adapted your processes or guidance to manage the risk of contaminants in a different way?
Well, the biggest thing is methods that so we don't get exposed at all. For example, the car fire. We more often now just let them burn. Yeah, we don't need to put them out. There's nothing to save. The insurance companies don't. There's nothing. There's no money in them, and it's actually better for the environment itself. Let it burn. It's better than we put water on it and put the different contaminants down into earth, into the drinking water. So we let it burn. But then we try different methods, and that's good with being a small tech-driven country, because Sweden has always been really into tech, which means we find it cool to test new stuff. So we try everything from high pressure hoses to extremely high pressure hoses. We got these actually smoke hand grenades. You probably have them here as well.
No.
Well, my incident commanders like them because they have them on their vehicle and they can pretend that they're soldiers and like, hey, I'm clearing a room, and they throw in a smoke hand grenade, which is dust, and we put dampens the fires and so on. I got some funny videos of that, but that's a totally different story for later on tonight. But we've changed, we've done quite a lot, but it's hard for me because I used to be a firefighter, but that's 20 years ago. I don't remember that. I need to trust my crews to develop new tactics and new methods and new tech on how to minimize exposure. But on the other hand, it's a balance, because sometimes you need to be really aggressive in order to save lives. You need to be really aggressive, going in hard, going in fast, and giving it everything you got. And then you're going to be exposed. But then it's all about coming down to how do we do it when we come out. We in the talk before, they talked about containers. We got canteen containers and MRE containers. It's not MREs as meals ready to eat, but it's actually containers that we can put out on scene. When we have these big incidents where there are more sets of PPEs and you can actually wash up and freshen up and everything, just to make sure that the crews are have the possibility to handle it the best way possible. But we've done quite a lot of things when it comes to methods.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I need to bring my instructor team here to explain it, because it's way too technical for me to follow now.
And I think that's the space we need to move into in the UK by changing our tactics to certain types of incidents, because a lot of services might tend to do the same thing because it works and works and works and works. But that doesn't necessarily help us manage contaminants on the incident ground for those level 1 and 2 commanders, does it? No. John, just to finish up before we go to a bit of Q&A from the audience, the working group and the IARC document, monograph 132. Can you just briefly give us an overview of that document, how we use it as a guiding principle for the project? There's a lot of research and academic studies out there, and we need to define it.
Yeah, there is, and I think it's really difficult. I think we're best to take examples from all of them. I do. So as a working group, we have our working packages, and one of our working packages was to look at all research, decide what research we wanted to look at and where we wanted to hang our hat on that. So was that from the UCLAM report? Was that from the IARC document? And yes, the information we got back is we hung our hats on the IARC document, and that's where we stand by. However, I think it's important to note, Luke, that control measures that have come out of other pieces of research, zoning would be a good example, potential to look into more health surveillance, we've taken on board as well. So I think that's an important thing to note. As for the working group, we have a number of packages. If I can just finish there as well, and relating to buildings as well. What you should expect from our working group is best practice, how a fire station should look, and where we can't get that, procedural ways to get your way through it.
Yeah, excellent. Right, if we could just open up to any questions from the audience.
Okay, hi, James Jones, Vimpex, but also I sit on the board of the FIA, the Fire Industry Association. We're obviously very interested in this, both commercially, but also to help the sector. And John, you mentioned how clean is clean. Well, that's the big question, isn't it? And I wonder how we are ever going to answer that without some extremely good medical science. But I think we can have a relative measure of cleanliness, how dirty it was when it was contaminated, and then how clean it is as a result of being decontaminated. And I wonder how we're going to check the veracity of the cleanliness when we've spent all this money on washing machines, on clean cabs, on whatever process, on whatever function, whatever kit we end up spending lots of money on, because we're going to spend a lot of money on this over the next 5 to 10 years. So it's a bit of a call out, really, as to some ideas of how an audit function might look in the UK to check the veracity of manufacturers like me, our claims, but also the efficacy of any processes that we put in place to get this stuff clean. So I'm interested, really, in your views
John?
On that element.
I think my view is it'll be taken out of our hands, if I'm honest. I think the HSE, as the regulator, will lead. I think they've been open and honest and say they have to do more work in this field themselves to understand it, and working with us, they're undertaking a piece of work. Is that finished? No. But they are going to publish the work that they've undertaken. I believe it will go into guidance of some sort, and with that guidance, usually like a British standard, but with other guidance as well, it will give you usually your minimum levels that you will have to follow. Otherwise, it'd be a breach of legislation or regulation. So my view is we should potentially do more about research, and I agree with you, and I think that's one of the things we've picked up. We all want to know how clean is clean or how dirty is dirty. At the moment, we have to look at it from a reasonably practical point of view. To summarise, I do believe it will be taken out of our hands. If you look at all other pieces of legislation, COSH, other ones where they've got measures, noise even, they'll all have a measure, and we'll audit ourselves against them, will be my opinion.
John, do you want to just come in?
Yeah. So, just to put it into context, if we make this about what the chief risk in my head that's been put forward is the particulate. It's washing solid matter off ourselves. When we look at gases, there's a raft of information out there that cites specific amounts of gas for specific periods of time that we all kind of conform to, especially within industry. The problem is with the solid, we've got 8+ billion people on the planet, all with ever so slightly different genetic makeups and all with ever so slight different biological profiles, which means their bodies are going to react differently to different levels of toxins. So what's going to work for one person is really inappropriate use of the word, sorry. What would cause damage for one person wouldn't necessarily for another. They might be bigger, they might have more cell, it would not cause the cell death. So I think until, as John rightly says, until an actual scientific that's way above my pea-sized brain is actually completed, the answer to that, how clean is clean, the answer has got to have to be as low as reasonably practicable to do it. Let's just, if it looks clean and smells clean and we've cleaned it, it's going to be clean.
Can I come back to you?
Of course.
Yeah. I don't. We're not scientists, so I think it would be dangerous to have a scientific argument, and I definitely put myself in the same category. The FIA, I'm talking for the FIA here, so not a commercial angle. We're really interested in helping with this.
Yeah.
And we're really interested, I don't know, John, you know, that we're really interested in finding a way of doing some research and setting out a hypothesis, if that's the right word, to describe an audit function for the sector. And I think there's an incredible opportunity here to get this right and to leapfrog what's happening in the States in the NFPA standards, and to set a bar that's achievable but high enough to mean something that would mean that we are at least auditing the cleaning functions of fire services, both laundry and SCBA. So it's a reminder, really, that the FIA are really engaged in this and want to work with the NFCC to get this right.
Absolutely, completely agree. And I know we've shared emails previous to this, and we will collaborate going forward. We just need to make time to have those meetings. I completely agree. Yeah.
Luke,
John? Yeah.
I agree with you. We've had the conversations, but it's how we collaborate, but then with the HSE as well. So doing a separate piece of work, and then the regulator comes in and actually goes, no, this is how clean it is, and exactly. It won't work, because you'll be going up, and then the regulator will always win with the fact that they can go into regulation or approved code of practice, anything like that. I think the important note is how we engage with the HSE and actually then utilise other research, other funding mechanisms to get that research. So I agree, I just think it has to be done in the right way.
Can we just show our appreciation to the team of 4 on stage? Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Remember that by taking time to learn from our speakers, you can earn CPD points from our partner CPDme. So do check out the link in the show notes. Our thanks to MSA Safety for their continued support for our podcast, and to Smart Digital for producing this series. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to For Every Response, the podcast from Emergency Services Times.